to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 145 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 1 of A Storm of Swords. That's Jaime 1.
Did A Storm of Swords trip you up again, like last week?
I got it. Weirdly, it was the word discussing.
Well, okay. Well, anyway, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. It is hot. It is really hot outside this week.
It is hot. You know, my niece is coming from Scotland, and she was shopping for summer clothes with the temperature 59 Fahrenheit, which is, what is that, 15 Celsius?
That's going to be a big bit of a culture shock for her.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've hit 100 twice this week.
Have we really hit 100? I didn't know we'd hit 100.
I know we were way in the upper 90s, 98, 99. Yeah. I think we might have tipped 100 a couple times.
The day after she arrives, we dropped back down to like 91. I was like, thank you for bringing that northern Arctic blast
right.
with you.
That cold front moves through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of the it's not like the southwestern U.S. where it's it's hot. Like when you're in Phoenix, it's 110 degrees, but you're not sweating because it's so dry. Here it's like a muggy, constantly sweating, miserable kind of heat. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I played tennis yesterday evening, and it was pretty brutal playing tennis. And I'd eaten kind of a big dinner. We had nut loaf for dinner, and I made my opponent laugh when I told him I had the nut loaf sweats.
That's the vegetarian version
equivalent
of the meat sweats.
Yeah, exactly.
Nut loaf sweats. That's good.
So my funny story from this week is, so you know, my wife, she teaches in a school.
Yes, we all do.
Well, they do. No, you don't all teach in schools. Oh, you all know.
We all know. Yes, we've heard many a good story about your wife and her class.
They do a COVID test on the staff, but they pool the COVID test.
How does that work? Three people per test?
Yes, exactly. I think it's 5 people per test. I in my imagination, there's a spittoon, and they all hack up into it.
That's why it says spittoon in the notes.
Exactly. And then they test the gloop that they've created, and sure enough, this week they said, "Oh, one of you's got COVID."
We don't know which one.
How is that helpful? They didn't send any of them home. They said, "You better go and get a COVID test."
Oh.
And the test was Thursday morning, and they emailed them on Saturday to say go get a COVID test. I'm like, this is stupid.
Oh, that is something. That's one way to go about it, I guess.
I guess it saves money, but I mean, that's crazy.
That is something. That reminds me of a. Wait, what were you saying?
My hope is she got to the spittoon before the COVID positive.
Right.
Person
Yes.
did,
Yeah, she wants to be early in that situation. Mm-hmm. First one in, first one out. That reminds me of a story that happened to Ethan this week. So he went out on a couple dates with this girl last week, and he thought, you know, she was nice and all, but there were no sparks, so he was kind of done with the.
You know, he has to bring some of the sparks.
He does have to bring his own. Yeah, yes, right.
Okay.
And so she had invited him to go down to the beach. They were going to drive down to the beach, and he didn't want to go. So he said that he had tested positive for COVID. And she was like, "Oh, shoot. I guess I better test myself too. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. And she tested positive. Oh, and she goes,
or at least,
well, since we're both positive, we might as well just go together. And he was like,
oh, that's awesome. So now he's gonna kiss her, even though she's got COVID.
Oh, so that backfired on him.
Oh, that's thrilled me.
Oh man, kids.
All right, we've got a lot to get through.
We
so let's
do.
get down to business. How did we leave Jaime Lannister? Well, technically we didn't, because this is his first POV.
True.
But his last scene, he was being questioned in the dungeons below Riverrun by Catelyn, with Brienne of Tarth in close attendance. Cat was plying him with alcohol to loosen his tongue, and indeed it looked like he might have said too much and was about to face the consequences from Cat. I guess not, since he's got a chapter. Mackelly, why don't we give him a summary of this one?
Okay, well, Jaime is free. Well, sort of. He's on a boat heading down the Red Fork, still bound, and accompanied by his cousin, Ser Cleos Frey, and Brienne of Tarth. They're headed for King's Landing, where Jaime's freedom is supposed to be reciprocated by Tyrion in the form of Sansa and Arya's return.
Their progress has been slow since Jaime cannot row in his manacles. Cleos is rowing, but ineffectively, leaving Brienne as the primary force driving their pace down the river. Well, the flow of the river helps, and also they've got a sail. And an outboard motor, presumably. Jaime only vaguely remembers his escape from Riverrun. He was too drunk from Catelyn's wine for clear recall. He does remember being bundled into a cloak, shoved into a boat, and Cat commanding the water gate be opened under the pretense that she was sending Cleos back to King's Landing with new terms for the Queen. At that point, Jaime fell asleep.
One thing Jaime does recall are the vows made prior to the escape and the conditions they were made under. Cat put the point of Brienne's sword against his chest and made him swear he'd never again take up arms against Stark or Tully, and that he'd convince Tyrion to return Sansa and Arya in response to Jaime's release. She had him swear on pretty much every family member and every title he holds, and if he didn't swear these vows, she'd have his blood.
Jaime picks up on Bree being high-born. She divulges that she's the daughter of Selwyn of Tarth, Lord of Evenfall. He's confused how the daughter of a Baratheon bannerman ended up in the service of Robb Stark, but Bree's had enough talking with such a monster, citing his violation of his sister, murder of his king, and flinging of an innocent child to his death as evidence of his monstrous nature. Jaime bristles at the tone taken towards Cersei, calling Brienne first a wench, then Lady Brienne, and finally Sir Brienne, comparing her to a cow dressed for battle.
That's not going to win him many friends, that kind of talk.
No.
Cleos tries to broker peace, explaining that Brienne got these false notions from Cat. Since the Starks can't beat Jaime in battle, they'll beat him with lies. Jaime wonders if Cleos truly believes what he's saying or just buttering Jaime up. When Cleos follows up with a claim that any man who believes a sworn brother of the Kingsguard would harm a child doesn't know the meaning of honor, Jaime has his answer. He's a lickspittle. Jaime's come to regret pushing Bran from the tower, primarily due to the endless grief Cersei gave him over it. She was worried Bran would wake and tell how he fell. Jaime wasn't concerned himself. He said he'd kill Ned and even Robert if need be.
He has previous. Their tour of the Riverlands from the Red Fork shows horrible devastation and destruction. Burned out and abandoned structures litter the banks, and there's little human life to speak of. Jaime asks his cousin to shave his head, after Brienne rejects Jaime being armed with a dagger to do it himself. He figures he'll be less recognisable with a bald head and scraggly beard, and he prefers the anonymity while in irons.
The trio come across a burned-out building, still smoldering, and a tree full of hanged women. Brienne is affected by the lack of chivalry in the action, and lands the boat in order to investigate. One woman wears a sign reading, "They lay with lions." The sight makes Jaime smile. This was done by Stark and Tully's side, not his. Cleos recalls that this was once an inn, and these tavern wenches. The two men debate who might be responsible. Jonas Bracken and Mark Piper get a mention, as does the always popular answer to every question, Beric Dondarrion.
Oh, very good. Cleos throws out the idea of Roose Bolton's Northmen, and Jaime learns that Bolton now holds Harrenhal. The idea is concerning. It would be trouble if they ran into Bolton's men, and they've got a long way to go through the Riverlands. The conversation is cut short when a sail is spotted. Back to the boat as quick as Jaime can shuffle. They try to outpace the larger boat, but it's futile. The river galley is gaining on them. Jaime figures the boat has 18 to 25 men. He spots Sir Robin Ryger, the Riverrun captain of the guard, on the prow.
Jaime calls out that they were released by Cat as a captive exchange, but Sir Robin responds that Cat Stark does not rule in Riverrun. A flight of arrows is launched toward the boat, and Bree steers the boat to the far side of an island in the river, hiding them from view temporarily due to the high bluff on the northern side. She quickly jumps from the boat, swims to the bluff, and begins to climb. But within moments, the galley comes into view. Jaime distracts the men by offering single combat with Sir Robin, but the old knight says he's tasked with bringing Jaime back alive if possible.
The archers prepare to launch more arrows, but before they can, Brienne rolls a huge boulder from the bluff's summit. It breaks apart as it falls, crushing some men, throwing others overboard, and puncturing the hull of the galley. When the little boat pulls away from the sinking galley, Jaime realizes he's a double winner. The threat of the ship is gone, as is Brienne. However, she's been running alongside the boat and dives from the high bluff into the water. Jaime considers swinging the oar at her head and killing her. Instead, he reaches it out to her to fish her back into the boat.
How sweet. Yeah, it looked bad for Jaime at the end of Cat 7, I believe.
Yes.
That I looked up when we did that chapter. It was published February 15th, so that was 4 months ago to the day, because we're recording this on June 15th.
You know what? I feel a lot better about not remembering that so much. That's a long time.
I had to go back and reread how that chapter ended. Here's a quick reminder. So he had been mocking Ned for fathering a bastard, Jon, obviously, and then he was comparing himself to having never strayed from Cersei. And then he told Cat he wouldn't have sex with her because Littlefinger had her first. And then he brought up Jon by name, and that's when Cat asked Brienne for her sword. And it looked like, oh, she's had enough of his mouth. This is bad.
Yeah.
So.
Well, she didn't intend to kill him.
That's right. She just kicked him out.
Banish him.
She really wasn't that concerned about getting the girls back at that point. She was just like, well, if I'm going to kick him out of here, I might as well put him to good use.
So you have a theory about chapter 1s?
Well, yeah, I just noticed that, like last chapter, which was the prologue, we compared the Game of Thrones prologue to both the Game of Thrones prologue, a Clash of Kings prologue, and now our Storm of Swords prologue. And I was thinking you could make some similar comparisons between Jaime 1 and Theon 1, which I don't think Theon 1 was the first chapter of a Clash of Kings, but it's the first chapter for a new POV.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, in both instances, they were existing characters who were non-POV characters, and now they get their time in the spotlight as POV characters. But, there's some differences. In Theon's case, he was a fairly minor kind of backgroundish character up until Clash of Kings, whereas Jaime, you could make an argument, is public enemy number 1. If you list the deeds that he's done, pushing Bran out of the off the tower, attacking Ned and killing his men like Jory Cassell, and he nearly got to Robb in the Whispering Wood, the Battle of the Whispering Wood, and killed a couple Karstarks, which has Rickard Karstark very angry at him. So it's exciting. I'm really looking forward to stepping into his head and seeing what makes Jaime Lannister tick here.
Yeah. So you're bringing up Theon 1 made me think about Theon's journey in the last book a little bit. I know we don't really have time for this digression, but I will digress nonetheless.
Do it.
Because Theon evolved a lot in... what was the last book called?
A Clash of Kings.
Clash of Kings.
Yes.
I already forgot.
You only said it like 70 times this past year.
Yeah, exactly. Because At the start, I mean, you think about it, his first chapter was him arriving at Pike, right?
Yes.
And so he was Team Stark then.
Uh-huh.
And he was the Theon we knew. And by the end of the book, he was, what he'd become.
Right.
Which was so different. So, but then I thought about it, and I had to give some credit to George Martin. That huge arc of change of that person, it never seemed false, or I mean, some stupid decisions along the way. My God, but the actual sort of narrative of it just made sense to me, and so to have affected that much of a change in one character over the course of a book without it being clunky or unbelievable.
Well put. Yeah. Yeah, if you think about it, there's similarities there too, because both characters started out. I mean, we're only on Jaime 1. We'll see whether he has any kind of similar arc or not.
He's going to stay the same throughout this book.
But
he's not going to change one iota.
They both start out incredibly full of themselves and arrogant and hard to like. And we'll see whether how that works out for Jaime as the story goes along. But it also, what you were talking there made me think about perspective. It's an amazing thing, really. I mean, if Theon was still a third person character and we were watching him do the things that he did, we might be like, this doesn't make any sense.
Good point.
He was Rob's best friend. He would never do this to him.
No, that's an excellent point. Yeah, without his perspective, none of his story makes any sense.
Right.
But from his perspective of trying to ingratiate himself with his father, it does. Yeah, it will be interesting if I mean, obviously, just becoming a POV character gives you a narrative arc because you were just wallpaper until now.
Right.
And the wallpaper was portrayed a certain way by the other characters, but now you have a life and you have an inner monologue, and even the worst things you've done can be justified, at least by you.
Yes, right. Most people are the stars of their own story in their heads.
Yeah.
So we'll see whether it's going to be a lot of fun to see whether we can wrap our heads around who Jaime is and why he has done or will do the things that he's done and will do.
So Jaime's free for the first time in a long time.
Oh, yes.
I mean, do you have any idea of this? Sorry to throw that at you.
He was taken captive in the Whispering Wood, which was a cat chapter.
I didn't mean chapters. I meant chronologically. How many months has he been
captive? I don't know months wise, but it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah. So he must feel, now that he's woken up from his alcoholic stupor, he must feel great. I mean, apart from the fact he's still a captive of sorts, he's seeing the sky.
Yes.
He's smelling the roses. He's smelling the burning farms.
Yes, the dead bodies. I think his line is, I'm drunk on sunshine or something like that. I'm free and I'm drunk on sunshine. Something along those lines.
So it does appear that Catelyn has taken it upon herself to free Jaime without consulting anyone. I mean, the fact that this boat is sent after them suggests that this was not a communal decision.
Yes, it does.
And I thought it was good of Jaime to shout back, Catelyn Stark said this was okay. Like, she might not have told anyone. She might have told everyone he must have escaped.
He was like, Sir Robin's like, wait, what?
What?
Oh, okay, never mind. Safe travels.
She does not rule Riverrun. And by the way, what?
Yeah, when he shouts that, and Robin Ryger shout, his retort is that Cat doesn't rule in Riverrun. That gives you a pretty good indication that she went rogue in this situation here.
She definitely went rogue, right? Yeah. But this, I mean, these are just Ryger is from the Riverlands. We have not yet met a Northern Lord to find out how they feel about it.
Oh, good point.
They are not going to be happy.
Yes,
I bring forth Exhibit A, Rickard Karstark, who wanted Jaime dead anyway.
Yeah, that's probably not going to go over well. We'll probably find out, but looking at it from here, I'm guessing that's not going to go well. So the question is, what happened? As I was thinking about it, there's basically three options. She changed her mind. Kat changed her mind, realized maybe she had had a little too much to drink and realized, oh, what have I done? So Robin, please go fix this mistake for me. Or her brother Edmure found out.
That can't be it, because Robin would have said, you don't rule here.
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. Edmure found out, and he's trying to undo what she did. Or King Robb has returned from the West and was not pleased with the move his mother made here, and is trying to recoup the Jaime like Edmure be doing. We know that he shot down the Jaime for the girls proposal at the very beginning of A Clash of Kings, like the first Cat chapter. So, and he did it. He said he couldn't do it because his men would rise up against him if he did something like that.
What he didn't realize was that he was giving his mother permission to go and do it by saying those words. She was like, I see what you want, Rob.
All right.
Don't worry.
I'll take care of it. Don't worry.
Exactly. But this could be a huge problem for Rob. I mean, his army is obviously feeling several strains. I mean, first of all, they've kind of run out of people to fight because basically Tywin has fled the scene. The Lannisters' other army has been destroyed. They can keep going picking off western towns, but it's not. That's more of a Tywin Lannister thing than a Robb Stark thing.
Right.
Winter is coming. That's another aspect here. Just a reminder, in case anyone from the north forgets this. The north, more than any other region, has to prepare for that winter. And maybe he could use this strife that's now been caused to perhaps retreat north with some dignity. That might be a possibility, because news has reached them of the fall of Winterfell, right?
Yes. It's reached Cat. We assume it will have reached Robb. We know it reached Cat.
Right. So yeah, it had reached Cat, exactly. So now he wants to go home. He could perhaps use this, because none of the Northern Lords are going to be very happy. If he says, let's go home, they might forgive him,
Right, and when you're talking about this strife, you're talking about the two things you just mentioned previously.
No, I meant the strife caused by Jaime's release.
Oh, okay. I got you now.
So, but anyway, it's trouble for Robb. I mean, I don't like that this has happened for Robb. It's going to be very hard to handle Rickard Karstark at all. Yeah,
he's already having troubles with Rickard Karstark. Just that the idea of ransoming Jaime.
So the deal that's been struck by Cat with Jaime is that he won't fight the Tullys or the Starks anymore, and the girls will be freed and sent home. It's not a completely hopeless deal, but Jaime doesn't have any intention of abiding by a vow that was extracted from him at sword point. And to be fair to Jaime, that's fair, but also he's got previous. He doesn't really cling to the vows he makes not at sword point. No. So why would he cling to the ones that are extracted out of him?
Couple things about the vow at knife point that you just mentioned, or not knife point, sword point rather. He wonders whether the High Septons. He wonders what the High Septons take on vows while drunk, in chains, and at sword point would be. And then he dismisses the High Septon as a fraud. I think he calls him a fat fraud. But it seems like the thought stems from him looking for an out to this vow, But also, he's out of the loop as far as news from King's Landing goes, because that High Septon is dead. He died in the King's Landing riot. There's been a new High Septon appointed. So, but it did seem like he was thinking of this as, well, I have no obligation to this vow. I was drunk, in chains, and at sword point.
Right.
And but there's also this. Cat kicks. So he remembers Cat kicking over a bucket, but it doesn't really explain why he remembers that image, and that's because the bucket that she kicked over, she said here is something along the lines of "Here's your honor," and kicked over a bucket of feces.
Human.
And,
Yes.
and, he is the Kingslayer after all. So, if he broke that vow, what would possibly be holding him to keeping this vow? It's basically, I think you just made that point a minute ago.
Which was extorted from him. I mean, you can't argue with that. I mean, there was a vow given under duress. I mean, I would free him from this one, and I'm not Team Jaime by any means.
Yeah, and she said, if you don't agree to these vows, I'm going to kill you. So, there, he didn't have a choice in the matter.
So, the other reason that this probably can't work, not just because Jaime is being dishonest, is also the fact that Catelyn is really putting her faith in Tyrion on the other end of the deal.
Right.
Little suspecting that basically Tyrion is out of power.
Yes, right.
Catelyn's demands are going to reach the entirely unsympathetic ears of Tywin Lannister, who is not going to care one iota what either of his sons has promised.
Yeah, I was actually I was going to ask you what you thought would happen if Jaime shows up and demands the girls be sent to Riverrun with Tywin in charge.
Well, I would say Tywin will squeeze the girls as much as he possibly can to get what he can out of the North. Because he's only got one of them, this is the slightly interesting thing. Catelyn is unaware that Arya is not captive.
Right.
He might manipulate a little bit and say, I'll send Sansa home now. I'll send Arya home when you guys are north of the neck and have bent the knee.
Right, yes. And of course, there is no Arya to send back.
Right. Oh, the problem with that, of course, is Sansa knows. Sansa knows that.
Well, Sansa doesn't know necessarily where Arya is. She just knows she's not seen her.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know she's escaped. They could have her in a dungeon for all Sansa knows.
Right, that's true. Yeah. That's
true. The note at the front of this book that we talked about in the prologue, it makes a little more sense now in this chapter because this escape is happening at the same time as the Battle of the Blackwater. Otherwise, news might have spread that Tywin is in control of King's Landing and totally changed Kat's decision here.
Good point. Although, of course, in reality, ravens don't fly fast enough for that to have been the case, but yes.
Right, yeah. I guess it depends on how long after the battle she decides to do this.
Unless, of course, the Lannisters confidently sent the ravens like a week before the battle.
Right.
So I do believe that Tyrion would have stuck to the spirit of the deal. He would know that she sent him the biggest gift she possibly could, and the least he could do is send back Sansa. But
yeah. Well, he told Sansa he was going to send her back as soon as his brother stopped fighting, right? I think that was the stipulation.
Right.
And there's no longer a plan for Sansa to marry Joffrey. He's going to marry Marjorie Tyrell now. So would make sense.
Yeah. So this could all fall into place because, like I say, one option for Robb is to just withdraw. Just to go back north with the troops, and so that fulfills that aspect of this for Tyrion.
Yeah.
He's no longer fighting us.
Yeah, especially with the strife going on in the north. I mean, it's not just Winterfell that's dealing with it.
Yeah. So the presence of Cleos Frey in the boat is quite interesting. As ever, the Freys live close to the fulcrum of things. They don't like to be out on the limb.
Not so much, no.
And it's kind of like typical of that is Cleos' behaviour in the boat. He's Team Jaime, but he can't help but defend Brienne every time Jaime says something mean to her.
Yes, right, yeah. He really, he did seem to try and keep the peace.
Yes.
A few times he mentioned, hey, just cool it, Jaime, with your insults and your barbs. But, speaking of Cleos, just because we got a lot of characters going on here, Jaime mentions that Cleos is the son of his aunt, Jenna Lannister. And so Cleos is Jenna and Emmon Frey's oldest son. Tion Frey is one of his younger brothers. He is also a captive, and then he's got two other brothers, Lionel and Walder. Tion has come up his name's come up a few times because it was proposed that Tion and Willem be traded for Sansa and Arya, and Robb proposed that, and Tyrion promptly rejected that. Now, of course, Jaime is a whale compared to the trout that would be Tion and Willem. But also, he mentions that Aemon Frey, who is Cleos' father, has been terrified of Tywin since he wed Jenna Lannister, Tywin's younger sister. And what that's alluding to is when Jenna and Tywin's father, Tytos, agreed to this betrothal between Aemon and Jenna, when 10-year-old Tywin found out, he felt that Aemon and the Freys in general were beneath Jenna and his family, and he threw an almighty fit about it. And Jenna was grateful that at least one person came to her defense over this wedding match here. But apparently that scared Aemon enough, and he's been terrified of Tywin ever since.
Good to know. We get Jaime's thoughts on pushing Bran out of the window. Cersei seems to blame Jaime for overreacting to the situation.
Yes.
But he then goes on to think that she was more nervous than him about Bran waking up. His point of view of this was like ours. A child who wakes up from a traumatic fall, you can say whatever he says is just a dream.
Right.
But Cersei was very worried about it. So he actually believes that whilst she was criticizing Jaime for overreacting, he thinks she was capable of sending the assassin to finish the job. Which isn't a great thing to think about your true love.
True, that's true. Yes, he does think it's possible that Cersei could have hired the man, but he's surprised, Jaime was surprised, that it seemed like maybe even a little hurt that she didn't send him to do it if she was the one that hired this cat's paw. But he's unsure. He doesn't know. Like we now know that Jaime himself doesn't know whether or not Cersei was the one who sent the cat's paw. From
reading it, I get the feeling if he was pressed, he would say she didn't do it.
Right.
But he feels that she was certainly capable of it.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that he doesn't know. So if it was Jaime, if it was Cersei, you'd think she might have told Jaime what she did.
Right. Why would she keep that from him? It's not like she's doing much worse than Jaime himself did.
Right. So it's almost, him not knowing is almost like, so maybe it wasn't Cersei, you know?
Yeah. And that also goes to when Cersei talked to Ned Stark. She admitted to every crime under the sun, right. But not that one. She denied
not that one, and not killing Jon Arryn. Those are the two she did not cop to at all. Everything else you could possibly imagine she was guilty of, and she copped to it.
Yeah, everything else which would have cost her life multiple times over,
right?
She copped to. But those two which, frankly, wouldn't have cost her life, she denied.
But you're right.
So, yeah, I think she's innocent of it.
Yeah, it's certainly the fact that Jaime doesn't know gives credence to that possibility. But I think you're right. I think one of the most fascinating parts about this chapter being a Jaime POV is getting his thoughts on the Bran push off the tower. And one of the things that I found rather... I use the word interesting too much. I was trying to think of another word to use, but I'll just say I found it interesting. Is that he's had nothing but time in his cell here to reflect on that deed. And the best remorse he can come up with was that he rused doing it because Cersei gave him grief over it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's not like he was down there thinking, I tried to kill a young child. He was like, I wish I hadn't done it because she just wouldn't stop nagging me about it.
Yeah, so. And that really goes to the sort of sociopathy of both these twins, really, that you could be that callously indifferent to what you did. You could imagine in the heat of the moment, or having analysed the situation, doing the act.
Right.
You'd at least feel bad about doing it.
Right.
Other than for the fact that you got into trouble for doing it.
Yeah, and it also it makes the before he pushed Bran out, he said, the things I do for love. and he pushed Brienne out. It takes on a bit of a different tone when you hear it from Jaime's perspective, because without his POV, it seemed he meant that he did it to protect his sister's honor for the love that he bore her. Like, I'm going to protect you. This doesn't come out that we're having an incestuous relationship. So I'm going to kill this boy, this 7-year-old boy. But as we find out in this chapter, he mostly just did it because he was feeling randy after a long travel from King's Landing to Winterfell and wanted to get back to business with Cersei. that was he said, I only just wanted an hour with Cersei. It was a long, difficult trip, and he had to watch drunk Robert stumble into her bed every night, and so yeah, really, the things he does for love, he meant quite literally. He wanted to get back to the lovemaking. It seems like.
So he begins the journey trying to be gentle with Bree, but he soon starts goading her. He calls her Lady Brienne. He sees her bristle. He starts on the fact she looks like a man. He calls her Ser Brienne. Brienne is a tough cookie, and she just lets all this wash over her. Perhaps a lifetime of it has inured her to it.
I'm nodding vociferously over here. I agree. That I'm guessing that's not the first time she's heard such remarks. When you are when you buck the traditional stereotype of in such a culture, I'm sure she hears it quite frequently.
Yeah. The only time she actually bridles really is to when he criticizes Tarth. Right. He calls it dreary, and so then she gets uppity about it. So the only time she sort of loses focus from the job in hand is when she sees the women hanging from the trees, and she actually pulls up. It seems like it's fairly recent because it's said that the crows had scarcely started on the corpses and the nearby building was still smouldering.
Yeah. And she thinks she's so offended by this because she thinks hanging women's bodies doesn't show true knighthood. And Jaime retorts, true knights see and do worse things in every battle that they fight. And, it kind of reminded me that despite her obvious prowess as a fighter, we watched her win the great melee at Bitterbridge when King Renly was watching over them. And but I don't believe she's been in any actual battles to this point. So, she's still naive to the realities of war. And we saw that firsthand in Tyrion's POV during the Battle of the Blackwater. There wasn't a whole lot of chivalry going on when he was out there fighting for his life, basically.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'll say is you don't need to have seen battle to know the truth about knights. I mean,
true.
Her view of knights is kind of similar to Sansa's, and Sansa's was because she was a child.
Yes.
And now Sansa has lived a little bit. She knows it's nonsense and doesn't make any sense. You'd think that Brienne had seen enough of the world to know that your typical knight was absolutely no better than your typical man.
Yes, that is a solid point, especially being in King Renly's retinue.
Right.
She should have been exposed to plenty of knights and should have seen that a lot of them were not necessarily chivalrous.
But I think trying to project onto Brienne I wonder if it's because she herself embodies exactly the things that a knight should embody. And because
Absolutely.
Other knights don't live up to it, she can't really see that. She misses the point of that. She thinks they just lapsed briefly. They are like I am. But she's the outlier here, not them.
That could very well be possible. Yeah, because in her heart, we don't have a Brienne POV here.
Right.
But in her heart, she thinks this is how you be a knight. I find it a little bit ironic that there's two knights in this boat, and one of them is not Brienne. Ser Cleos is a knight, which is a little bit silly. I wonder how he managed to get that knighthood. So Jaime notices that the women, there's a lot of women hung up in this tree, and one of them has a sign that said they laid with lions, and he smiles at this, which I found rather distasteful.
Well, I mean, it's distasteful, but I mean, it's a win for him. The fact that it wasn't his side that did this,
right? Yes, that's exactly why he smiled, rubbing in Brienne's face that it wasn't his side; it was her side who did this unchivalrous act here. And then Jaime speculates that the women were hung by Jonas Bracken. He's a lord, and if he says, my father burned his castle, and actually it was the mountain that burned Stonehenge, which is House Bracken's seat. But then Jonas retook the castle, or I guess what remained of the castle, after Riverrun was freed in the Battle of the Camps. But also, if this is Bracken lands, like he says it is, it gives us a rough idea of where they are on the map, and it's not very far from Riverrun. They haven't made it very far, but it is only day one, so, and this is a rather lazy river. He mentions that there's a lot of twists and turns, and, it's a slow, wide, slow-flowing river. So I guess I'm not surprised, and they've only got a little sail and mostly Brienne's arm strength to keep them going.
It may not have been Jonas Bracken, of course, because we're not too terribly far from Harrenhal, so it could have been Roose Bolton sending out the brave companions to root out Lannisters, returning to the places that were visited under Tywin and found those who helped them. We already know about this, that they because the brave companions themselves switch sides, they know exactly who the Lannister collaborators were.
Yes, they do.
So
because they paid the collaborators the first time. And Arya said they came back sometimes with bags of silver and heads. Right. So they just retook the silver they paid these people and their heads, which is terrible. And of course, Mark Piper and Beric Dondarrion also are suggested, and that, of course, is if Beric Dondarrion is still alive. It depends on which day of the week it is. We don't know, really. And Mark Piper, he's been around. We've been hearing his name since Ned sat the Iron Throne that day when Robert was hunting. Mark Piper was one of the knights that was there. So, don't know who it is. But if I were betting, I would put money on the Brave Companions, since it seems like something they would do.
Yes, good point. So, Jaime cuts his hair off. It may have just been a ruse to try and get hold of a knife, but he follows through with it and has all his hair cut off. And interestingly, he does make the point that it's because he'd be ashamed to be spotted manacled. But the real danger would be being recognised as Jaime Lannister. I mean, so there are two reasons for doing it. One is to conceal the fact that you're Jaime Lannister, and this would definitely help. But then he has this sort of internal thing of I don't want people to see me like this and recognize me like this.
Yes.
And it's that doesn't matter. Fleeing from...
I agree. I was wondering what his motive was really here too. He says it was because of the two reasons you just mentioned. But at this point, when he shaves his head, or has Ser Cleos shave his head, he doesn't know that his father has lost Harrenhal. He thinks this is still Lannister lands. And so I was thinking, is his pride getting above what's in best interest for him? Because if they do come across Lannister men, the Lannister men could probably free him. There's only one Brienne. As long as there's a lot of Lannister men, more than just 2 or 3, they very well could free him if he looks and they believe that he is Jaime Lannister. But when he shaves his head to go incognito and he says, "No, I'm Jaime Lannister," they'll be like, "No, you're not. You're not Jaime Lannister. Let me see some ID."
But of course, I mean, the one thing is, being born to it, he would have a natural authority that probably would make the few Lannisters go, "Wait a minute, let's take him to his father to find out."
Right, he might just be. We don't want to be wrong here.
Right. So the devastation of the Riverlands is on full display. There's nothing to see but empty, burned-out dwellings, dead bodies, a lone girl, a few men digging in a field. They all run at the sight of anybody. The Riverland has borne the brunt of this war, and they weren't really involved. They've just become the venue for it.
Yep, it's really... I feel for the people of the Riverlands. More than anyone else in this story, I feel for the people of the Riverlands who had nothing to do with the start of this war, which is the case probably in most wars. It's just the people that bear the biggest brunt of it all.
Yeah.
So Brienne starts to cut down the bodies of the women that Ser Cleos realizes are tavern wenches from the tavern that used to stand there. And she sees a sail, and she says, "Hurry, back to the boat we go." But they can't outrun what Jaime describes as a river galley. He says there's, I think there's 18 oars, and they've got 1.5 oars. And so, the problem really that the whole crux of the issue is that Cat had no authority in Riverrun to prevent this from happening. And this is exactly what was going to happen if she didn't have the authority to stop it. I guess she was hoping that no one would find out for a while to give them a few days head start, which apparently wasn't the case.
Head start. Yeah, exactly. That's what she was hoping for. Yeah.
There's not a lot to say about the fight itself, about the chase.
Apart from Brienne once again shows her expertise. I mean, they were seriously outgunned and outmanned, and she single-handedly won it for them.
Yes.
By smarts and strength.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. But so at the end of the chapter, Jaime saves Brienne rather than kills her. He does it twice, in fact. When she's climbing this bluff, he realizes those archers are going to spot her and feather her with arrows, as soon as they see her. So he distracts them by shouting a proposal of a single combat.
It was Catelyn Stark!
Yeah. He proposes single combat with Robin Ryger, and of course Robin Ryger rejects it. And then, but it gave that, back and forth, that banter gave Brienne enough time to get up to the top of the bluff. But then at the very end of the chapter, he saves her. What he thinks about hitting her with an oar and either drowning her or knocking her senseless so that they can escape, or killing her or whatever. But instead he reaches the oar out and fishes her back into the boat. And is that a sign that there's some good in him somewhere? Or is it other motive?
The first one you could put down to self-preservation, but the second one is selfless in that he could have got rid of her at that point. The first one, he needed her to climb that bluff and win the battle for them,
Right.
Otherwise he was going back to the dungeon at best.
Yeah, and, he doesn't... You could make the argument Brienne is his best chance of survival. Because she's not shackled, and she is apparently a very good fighter from what limited action we've seen her in. But they're also both headed in the same direction. Like her mission is to get him home. Yeah. So there's no necessarily,
not to kill him.
She's not taking him to a dungeon. She's helping him get freed. So, Anyway, the very last line, Brienne says he says, I guess you expect me to thank you or something like that. And she says, I don't want your thanks. I swore an oath to bring you safely to King's Landing. And he says, and you mean to keep it. Now there's a wonder. And, I missed that until my very last reread. I think it was this morning. And I realized, he's saying, look at this, a person who actually means to keep their oath. What a crazy idea that is. And so it's certainly a good indication of his intentions, whether or not he plans to keep the vow to Cat.
And maybe a lesson for him, maybe the fact that maybe Brienne's example will rub off on him.
Maybe, yeah.
All right, do you have some background for us?
I gathered up a little bit of background. So back in Cat 5 of A Clash of Kings, I did some background on several of the new characters Cat met. That was when she first arrived at Riverrun with Brienne after visiting with the Baratheon brothers. That did not go very well. And I stopped short of discussing Robin Ryger due to time constraints, which works out well for this chapter because I didn't have a lot of other options to go with. So let's find out a bit more about Sir Robin and House Ryger. Well, as is mentioned in this chapter, he is the captain of guard for Riverrun, and he's been so for quite a while, as Jaime puts it, he's of an age with Hoster, who is in his early 60s. So, I assume Robin Ryger is late 50s to early to mid 60s as well. There's really not much additional information on him. So now let's take a look at House Ryger, which is a noble house of the Riverlands and one of the key bannermen to the Tullys. Their seat is called Willowwood, and there's no mention of a location of Willowwood. So I don't know where it's located, but it's the house's sigil is a green willow tree on white. And here's an interesting fact about the Rygers. During Robert's Rebellion, House Ryger didn't follow their Lord Paramount Hoster Tully in backing Robert. Instead, they stayed loyal to the Targaryens, which is a bit surprising considering Robin would have been the captain of Hoster's guard back then as well, you'd imagine, if he's been so for quite a while. So it got me wondering, might Willowwood be near Derry? Because that's another Riverlands house that also stayed loyal to King Aerys II during the Robert's Rebellion.
Interesting.
Could be totally have nothing to do with Derry, but, maybe they were influenced by the Derrys in some way. Right. Or all the way around.
That's an interesting point. And surprising that all was forgiven afterwards. Although, Hoster Tully is not Tywin Lannister.
True. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I should say Stannis Baratheon.
Yes. The Derrys were affected they were hit pretty severely with punishment. So maybe that's why Willowwood doesn't have a location. It's just a castle, no lands.
So comparison with the television show. So Cleos Frey is dead in the show. He was murdered by Jaime in a failed escape attempt earlier. So this scene is just Brienne and Jaime. The pursuit part is dropped. So in order to give the scene some jeopardy and excitement, 3 soldiers who murdered the women happen upon Brienne and Jaime as they're cutting them down. One of them actually recognizes Jaime for who he is, and then Brienne breaks bad on all 3 of them and kills them all, to Jaime's wide-eyed amazement, because he's still bound and can't do anything to help, so he just has to watch.
Right.
So you get the same kind of thing, Brienne is there, and she has the same kind of line, you don't have to thank me, I'm taking you to King's Landing, I made a promise, So
right.
It captures the flavour of the story without the whole river pursuit, which probably would have been a pain to film.
Yeah, I do like the presence of Ser Cleos, though. I like there being a trio instead of a duo.
I do too, and his murder was always a bit weird because it was to help Jaime escape, but it didn't really explain how it helped him to escape, as I remember. He murdered him and then he was escaped.
I vaguely remember that scene. Yeah. Yes.
Pedantry. If you dive from a cliff into a river, that's pretty dangerous.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I know Brienne is pretty badass, but that's pretty dangerous. So let's assume the river is deep enough that you don't kill yourself in the dive. Your armor is going to weigh you down. It's going to be hard to swim in armor.
Yeah,
she definitely has some armor.
Even if she's wearing a leather jerkin.
Yeah,
that would get really heavy really fast.
It's just a no-win situation for me. That.
Yeah, she needed to jump into the boat. That's what she needed to do. Again, this is a character decision, so we.
No, I know what you're going to say. It's pure pedantry.
Okay. So Robin Ryger says to Jaime, "I'm like, this is seriously one sentence to the next sentence. I'm supposed to bring you back alive if possible as a reason why he won't fight Jaime." And then after the period that ends that sentence, the very next words are archers, ready, set, and he's about to say loose when the boulders fall. And I was like, but what?
Have you seen Mars Attacks?
I have, yes.
Remember the Martians would say, "We come in peace," and then they would shoot everyone in their path. They just had these stock phrases they threw out like, "We come in peace."
Yeah, I thought that doesn't fit. I don't know how that fits.
Yeah. News and notes. So tomorrow we're going to host a live chat session, right, with our Lord Paramount and Royal Kingsguard members of our Buy Me a Coffee site.
That's right. Well, tomorrow for us right now. By the time people are listening to this, it'll have already happened.
In the past. Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited about it anyway.
I am too. It should be a lot of fun. I hope that more of you will come join us soon on these chats.
Yeah.
Go check out our Buy Me a Coffee site and check out the details. We have a lot of fun on these. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, this will be our second one, right? But the first one, I mean, I just fell in love with those guys.
Yeah. I had so much fun. It was funny because we have a time limit, and as the time was ticking down, you realized there was a time limit. I was like just in the middle of talking, and then all of a sudden it went boom. It was
in
gone.
A surprise to no one, Mackelly was blathering on when the time expired.
Perfect ending. That's a perfect ending to it. How else would it have ended? But in other news, we got some good news for those of you hoping to strut around your house like Aegon the Conqueror. Jalic Blades, known for creating amazing replica swords from the A Song of Ice and Fire world, is taking pre-orders for their replica of Blackfyre, the sword wielded by none other than Aegon the Conqueror himself, along with many of his heirs. It's one of the most famous swords in all of Westeros, whose current whereabouts is yet unknown. Now, these replicas even have the backing of George Martin himself, as the design closely replicates what Martin has envisioned in his own head. So that's pretty neat. The first limited edition version will be made with stainless steel. However, at some point, the company plans to roll out an even more exclusive version made from Damascus steel, which is pretty much the closest thing we have in this world to Valyrian steel. But we'll get a look at the sword soon, as Blackfyre is featured in House of the Dragon. So we'll get an idea of what the sword will look like, I guess.
Yeah. All right, let's draw a conclusion. It's always exciting to have a new POV character, especially one like Jaime, who's been such a significant player and has insights that none of our other current POVs can offer.
Right. Yes, I'm very excited about this.
Yeah. I say current because maybe Cersei will be a POV one day, and she could offer us the other side of the equation that's most interesting to me right here. As
twins often do.
Yes. He is such an interesting character already because he doesn't deny his own parts in Bran's fall, and is callously indifferent to the fact that it was the attempted murder of a child. But he does also he's very comfortable owning up to his own actions. The word Kingslayer bothers him, but he doesn't seem to waste his breath defending himself.
Right.
If I was him, with his backstory, every time someone called me a Kingslayer, I'd be like, here is my script about Mad King Aerys. Read that
Just
and
read
tell
it.
me what I should have done. You know?
They didn't call him Mad King because he was mad cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's, I thought this chapter was a good baseline for Jaime in our lives because, we get an idea of who Jaime is right now. He began to rue pushing Bran out the window because of Cersei's grief, not because of the fact that he tried to kill a 7-year-old boy. We saw him smiling at the sign on the women. He said awful things to Brienne. He laughed at 2 of the men fell off the galley after the boulder hit it, and it was clear they couldn't swim and they were drowning, and he laughed at that. It's we saw how, like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we saw how Theon evolved or devolved, whichever way you want to go with that, in A Clash of King, and it'll be intriguing to see what Jaime's story arc is going to be like here in Storm of Swords.
I thought of another parallel, actually. The both of them, their story arc was them leaving Riverrun by watercraft.
Oh.
On the way back to see their father.
Right. Oh, yes. Good point. I wonder if Jaime will get Brienne pregnant like Theon thought he got the captain's daughter pregnant.
Let's not rule it out. So he has a fair, shall we say, opinion of his sister. He loves her totally, both appropriately and inappropriately.
True.
But he also believes her capable of ordering cold-blooded child murder. They are twins.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I find it fascinating that this person, Jaime Lannister, of all the Lannisters, showed Tyrion love and kindness as a child. We've not seen any evidence of that kind of thing yet, except for that he seems to love his family. No doubt about that. He really seems to love his family.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he loves his father too.
Yeah, we'll maybe if they get back to King's Landing, it'd be interesting to see if that is the case. But we haven't seen that side of him since we've been in his head this one chapter here. It wasn't a lot of. You get the idea that this is the kind of guy that will show love and kindness to someone who needs it.
Right. Yeah, but I mean that it's the problem with trying to extrapolate from small amounts of data, you know.
Yes.
We have the other data point which says he definitely was friendly and kind to Tyrion. So
right.
let's see if eventually we join these two dots together.
Right. I like it.
So Brienne might have the fighting chops needed to get them all the way to King's Landing. I mean, certainly round 1 has gone to her. But ultimately, will that help the Starks? It's certainly going to give Robb a huge headache when he finds out. I mean, like you say, he might have arrived back in Riverrun, but we think this is the next day.
Right. Yeah.
And he wasn't there last night, so chances are this is the jailer went, hey, he's missing, you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it said that Jaime remembered there was a problem with the jailer, but Brienne overpowered him or something. So it might have been that scuffle, or someone came down to feed Jaime. Yeah. But regardless,
someone came down to feed Jaime, and it was the jailer in the cell.
Yes, that could be it. Yeah, it seems to answer your question, it seems unlikely that this will help the Starks a great deal. You had mentioned maybe if Tyrion was still in power, maybe even if Cersei was in power, if Jaime was, passionate enough about this, maybe he could convince Cersei. But with Tywin, good luck with that.
Yeah, actually, Cersei possibly, because I think Cersei will be so grateful to see Jaime again that she probably would give up both the girls.
If she had them both.
Right. I hadn't forgotten, just to be clear.
Yeah, but, it's still a long way to go through the worst war-torn region of the realm. And, this boat only takes them so far. The Trident eventually spills into the Bay of Crabs, which is kind of near the inn at the crossroads. So then they'll have to take the King's Road or, go off-roading from there. Yeah. So they've still got a long way to go.
Yeah. He didn't save Brienne twice, but he did fail to kill her twice when he had the opportunity.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Is it because he's good and kind, or is it because he sees her as his best chance of survival?
Exactly.
Or is it both of those things?
Yes, there's definitely evidence to support both.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen to Cat?
If it was anyone but the king's mother, you would assume that they would be clapped in irons. And
yes.
Perhaps lose their life for this.
Yeah, it's she's going to be awfully thankful that her son is King Robb, not just Lord Robb or something, Right. But of course, we'll find out next week, because guess what? It's a Cat chapter.
Is it? I hadn't looked ahead.
We're heading to a Cat chapter next week, so this could be very interesting.
So this will be the new use of Jaime's cell. Okay, there are 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave a review, that helps to spread the word. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhall.threadless.com. Or you could buy us an Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhall. Or you could become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of a Realm level. Either would be most welcome.
Absolutely. And then, if you join as the Lord Paramount level, you can come hang out with us on our live chats.
We would love that.
Absolutely. And of course, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhall. We are out on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.